How you doing, Pierre? You okay?
Very good, Danny. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time. So yeah, I mean, to start off with, if you just want to kind of explain kind of your upbringing, your early days, kind of when you were involved in sports, if you were involved in sports at a young age, and then just go from there, really.
Okay, so I was born in beautiful Madagascar, and which is a awesome place, but unfortunately very like poor, like country. So like at the age I was I think 8 months, so very young. I got adopted by a beautiful multicultural family, where by an Italian father and a Finnish mother. And they brought me to Italy, and I grew up in this little city in the north, which is called Desenzano, which is a city by the lake fundamentally, and that's kind of like where I had the possibility to start to explore sailing as a potential sport for
Fun.
like just exploring.
Yeah. Okay. And so you currently reside in Italy then?
Yeah. I grew up there most of my life. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, that's nice. Anyway, so I mean, so at what stage did you kind of fall into sailing? What was the process or like the procedure behind that?
So I think like when I was very young, I was one of those kids that I think people would politely call energetic, but
Yeah.
it was a bit of a pain in the ass. So like my parents always tried to like channel all this energy into different activities, and sports really is like was the thing that suited me like a lot. You know,
Mhm.
so I did a lot of sports such as karate or like ice hockey, which was something that I did through my mother's side because
Yeah.
hockey is very big in Finland.
Okay.
And but also because we were living next to the lake, there was a possibility to join like this sailing course for young kids. So when I
Mhm.
was 8 years old, my parents signed me up, and from there I really started to fall in love with the sport because I just love being in the nature and just sailing
Right.
as an activity. I just loved it, man.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So I mean, at that stage, what kind of what made you want to turn professional? Was it a situation where someone said, "Look, I think you're actually carved out for a career in this, in terms of your abilities," or was it kind of your parents or someone else who may have got kind of
Yeah.
wind of how good you were and maybe pushed you in that direction?
Well, for starters, I was the very first sailor in the family. So my parents didn't do any sailing, knew nothing about it. So it was very difficult to even understand how is the sailing reality like. So in the very
Mm.
beginning, we didn't know anything. And also, I think there was the fact that in the beginning, I sucked at sailing. I was really bad. I was always the last in the races and stuff, but
Yeah.
I had the passion for the game, right?
Yeah.
So the kind of like the progression, the career progression in the sailing works like
Yeah.
this: that when you're very young, you
Mm.
compete in this small boat called Optimista, and you
Right.
usually compete when you are like something like 15 or something. But
Yeah.
basically like you can stop competing because of your age or because of your weight. So after a while, if you're too heavy, the boat
Yeah.
just is too slow, and you're not
Okay.
competitive anymore.
Yeah.
So I grew up a little bit quickly, and so I exited the Optimist at 13. And I think that's really one of the key moments in a career of a sailor, when you need to make the decision: what do I do? Do I progress forward? And does it make sense actually going into like a professional career, or at least
Mm.
training more seriously? Let's say like this, because
Yeah.
calling it professional, I think at that stage is still like a little early,
Mhm.
because I think like I think you can say professional more when you start approaching more like the Olympic classes, because
Okay.
again, when you transition in a young age, you transition from Optimist in my case to Laser 4.7, which
Right.
is a
Okay.
smaller version of the Olympic class. But then when I was, I think like 17, that's I think when I really said like, hey, now it's time to,
Got
to
serious about it.
yeah,
Right, okay. And then, so, I mean, because I'm obviously from a footballing background, as you know, 'cause we obviously spoke before on the phone,
yeah,
and kind of from a financial perspective, it's just a case of going out and buying your football boots, which again, for some people is expensive. Obviously now you can get varied kind of qualities in football boots. So it can range from anything between, say, £20 up to like 150 and beyond. So in terms of that, it's just a case of buying football boots, shin pads, and generally most kids have got shorts and t-shirts at home, or even a tracksuit that they can go and like fling on and play. But in terms of kind of financing your kind of sailing career initially, what was that? What was that involved? Like, what was involved in that?
Well, I think we need to make a huge difference here in the sense that there are two main types of sailing. So there is the kind of like America's Cup, which is super professional, beautiful business infrastructure, where there is a lot of opportunities. But most of the other types of sailing, so including like my Olympic class, unfortunately, like at least at the time when I was racing, there wasn't really like a business infrastructure, like a well-developed infrastructure. So we didn't have any opportunity to actually earn from our activity. So we were training, like especially when after 17 years old, I was training like a professional, but that wasn't really compensated in the same way. So I think like one of the key characteristic of sports, kind of like sailing, where there is not this business infrastructure, is the fact that you have to self-finance most of the competition and training expenses. And like, I think in my case, I can say that I'm an absolutely lucky person, that I was in a position where my family, like for many other sailors out there, we were able to cover the costs in this way, but it wasn't really easy at all, because again, it's a really big choice, because it's not cheap to do this professionally, and it's really big, kind of like a burden on, I think, like on the family finance. It's not an easy choice,
Yeah, of course. And I suppose from that perspective, obviously you feel the burden for your parents or whoever's paying for your facilities and your equipment. So from that perspective, was it a case of kind of thinking, well, I'm not getting paid, you guys are financing it for me, I may not even make it or have a sustained career within this like sport? What were you kind of thinking? Shall I pursue it, or were you thinking about kind of other things at that point?
Well, I think like at the very beginning of my career, until like after the 2008 Olympic Games, like before, I wasn't really aware of the cost. I didn't just keep it in my head. My father was always very supportive, and also my mother was pushing me a lot and saying, just go for it. We can do it, so do it. And I wasn't really looking at the numbers, because I was really trying to stay as focused on the game as much as possible. But then, I guess, when you grow up and you start developing some maturity, you realize that there is a whole dynamic behind that allows you to do what you're capable of doing. And very often I stopped and at that point and thought, does it make any sense? Because I think like when you do some kind of activity, you also look at the upside. Of course, like the financial part, it's not all. We are not doing it because of the money, but it's a consideration that we have to really like think about at some point, because otherwise it's just financially unsustainable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned the Olympics there, and obviously that's an amazing achievement in itself. So talk to me about kind of leading up to the Olympics. Did you feel the pressure behind you? Were you kind of confident, excited, all of the above?
Yeah, I think going like the day I qualified for Olympics, I think I could literally walk in the clouds. But because I think it's such a for any athlete that competes for Olympic sports, that's kind of like the highlight of like a dream come true, because you can say, hey, I've been there and I've done it. So it was kind of like the culmination of, I think, like 2-3 years, I think, of really committed training. Because one thing is like when you come from like, let's say, being a teenager and you say, hey, I'm training hard, but once the Olympics become a reality, you really have to commit. There is no way of chickening out. You got to go all in. And there was a lot of work being done. And fortunately, I think, the combination of good work and maybe also a bit of luck, so the stars somehow aligned, allowed me to then participate. And I was so excited, man, because you can, like, the beautiful thing of the Olympic Park is this. You go in there and you see so many professional athletes that have so many different approaches to their craft. And you can learn so much from all this diversity, and just observing some of the champions, it's just beautiful, man.
Just see how they go about their work. Did you manage to speak to any of those people that you mentioned? And obviously, did you get any hints and tips?
Highlight of my Olympic Games was a picture with Usain Bolt. Okay, so,
really? Nice.
yeah. I think it's somewhere hidden deep inside my Facebook somewhere, but there is a picture with me you're saying, and I
Yeah.
loved it.
Wow.
But it's just like the possibility of just interacting with many different athletes, and from different sports, whether it's a shot putter or maybe someone from gymnastics, or it really depends. But for one thing, I have to say that for us sailors, I think the experience of the Olympics, at least in Beijing, was a little bit different because we were actually in Qingdao, which was a couple of hours away by plane. We weren't really in
Okay.
Beijing all the time.
Yeah.
So the actual moments when we got the chance to interact with other athletes was at the opening and closing ceremony. So that was
Okay.
really like a beautiful moment to just get in
Yeah.
there and talk to everyone.
That's it, yeah. And sometimes when those kind of moments arise in your life, you have to try and capitalize on it because, like you said before, it may never happen again.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
the Olympics, you know how tough it is anyway. You're training for kind of years before you even get to that kind of stage. So I mean that's commendable in itself. Obviously amazing that you achieved that. So in terms of
Thank
kind
you.
of when you were there, did you experience, obviously you mentioned the highs, were there any lows? Kind of, did you look at some of the other kind of athletes and think, God, like you're maybe not even the sailors, talking about kind of the sprinters and like you said, shot putters and high jumpers and things like that. And you looked at them, did you ever look and think kind of, oh, they're being financed heavily by whoever they were being financed and we're not? Was there ever kind of that train of thought?
I think like you have to, like in terms of lows and difficulties of being able to reach that point, there is a
Mm,
series of like life choices that you have to make prior to you arriving to that moment. And I think like reflecting on my experience, one of the lows was really like just juggling the commitment of being a professional athlete with
yeah,
being uh, kind of like late teenager that maybe wants to explore other areas of
or,
his personality, such as developing maybe like relationship with the girlfriend or something,
mm,
or just your friends are going out and having fun, and you got to say, hey, no, I have to stay inside because I have training or competition
mm,
next day. So that was really something that was a hard choice. Plus, then the second thing that comes to my mind is the school, because
mm,
sometimes unfortunately some teachers weren't really that supportive of the process of committing to a professional schedule as an
really?
athlete. Yeah,
Oh,
because they were kind of like sometimes like I don't think they understood it, because I mean I grew up in Italy, so we're very big on football. So if you're a footballer, they go like, yeah, I understand that, but
yeah.
other sports they don't really understand it. So like maybe they were like, for example, doing like a surprise test for me after 7 days of competition, and I was like just
Oh,
unnecessary, because it is not like I wasn't studying, because I actually had
yeah,
really decent grades, but it
yeah.
was just, I don't know, just some bad feeling about that, know.
Yeah, so where do you think that came from? Was that a bit of resentment from their side, or were they just trying to catch you out, or maybe try and give you a reality check? And in their head, they're probably thinking, well, it's probably not going to materialize for yourself going forward as being a
And
sailor.
I think it can come from different, like not every teacher is the same, right? Because
Yeah, of course.
although someone can maybe be challenging you and say, hey, you should study harder, they can
Mm,
say it for many different reasons. So I think like
yeah,
some teachers were like saying that, hey, like you should study so that you can have an option in case your sports doesn't work,
yeah,
or other teachers were like, just nasty maybe. I don't know, but
mm,
but I think it's very diverse. There is no way to say that there is a common denominator in the sentiment that they had, so they
yeah,
came from many different angles, I think, so.
understand. So, I mean, to go back slightly, so you're now in your professional career as a sailor.
Yeah.
At that point, had you kind of thought about studying? Were you studying for a degree or something alongside whilst obviously being a sailor, or what was your train of thought from that perspective? Because for me, I always kind of concentrated on just making it as a footballer, and once I kind of got to a level where I was playing professionally, I wanted to sustain it. So I didn't. My train of thought wasn't let me go and study. There were people that were doing that, and that's fine. But kind of for me, I didn't want to detract away from being fully focused on playing football. So when I was going home after training, after doing a weight session or whatever, I'd want to relax for the next day, and that was just me. But again, my message is generally do what's right for you. So I'm just trying to establish what was kind of your thinking at that point.
Well, I think like when you are, let's say up until high school. So like, for example, I qualified for the Olympics the same year that I had graduation. So it was
Yeah,
it was a roller coaster of a year because it was a lot of juggling.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I think like, I studied most of the time of my career because let's say like 2008 was the highlight of my career. I mean, I went for another Olympic campaign, but all the time leading up to it, I had, like elementary, middle, and then, like high school until the end.
yeah,
So, like it's kind of like something that you have to do, I guess, at that age. And my father was just saying like, hey, just complete it. Like he was saying like, don't even focus on getting the good grades, just just get through, And he was,
yeah,
he wasn't too tough about it. But I think, like because just touching back on the topic of like the economic sustainability of what you do, I think after a while he started to realize that the upside of being a professional sailor wasn't very well clearly defined because
mm,
again it's an expensive sport, and I think only very few people are in a position where they can do it. Although, like, I want to open up a small parenthesis that maybe some countries are doing better than others. For example, like the UK, they are geniuses, I think, in terms on how they handle that. But also like Australia, New Zealand. But
yeah,
so like it really depends on what country you are at right now. In my case, in Finland, the business infrastructure wasn't really there. But it's not like I want to be like clear and say that it's not to blame like the fact that that Finland didn't have it, but I think they
yeah,
were just a different stage of development. Because I think like the UK, they are kind of like companies, right? Finland was
yeah,
kind of like a startup at the moment, so they were really figuring out things. And
yeah,
then like maybe England and other countries were more like mature companies with mature infrastructure. So it was just a different. It's about timing.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from that perspective. So obviously you mentioned kind of competing in the Olympics, and that was amazing. And obviously that was obviously one of your career highlights. Um, Kind of the back end of your career, and you're established still, but you're not no longer competing for a place in the Olympic team or whatever it may be. What was your thought process at that point? What were you thinking? Were you thinking, well, let's continue as long as possible, or maybe look to kind of look for another career outside of this field?
I thought like I could do it until the last day of my life.
Yeah,
Like the concept of retirement wasn't something that didn't even never crossed my mind. I think also like if we look at a little bit the timeline, I retired at the age of 22. So when you're a sailor, you can compete until you are 35 or something. So it was still
yeah,
relatively aged to the average. So at that point, you
yeah,
don't really think about maybe it's going to end. But of course, I do remember a time after the first games when I was thinking that, hey, does it really make sense to put my family through this same kind of like ordeal of not only financially, but just being there and supportive as I train so intensely,
yeah,
because so I had the thought about it, like maybe should I do it, should I not? But
mm,
I think like we athletes are somehow like very confident in our abilities, and like if you have a goal in front of your head, you're
mm,
rarely back out of it.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. I suppose you kind of need that in your psyche as a sports person anyway, just
yeah,
because depending on what sport you're in. I mean, you could be in a team um, team sport like myself, but you still have to be single-minded and look after yourself to a certain degree. And there's always going to be ups and downs and highs and lows, and you need that kind of resilience to take you forward. And for me, that's helped me massively in my current kind of um, current career that I'm in at the moment. I'm actually in property
yeah,
at the moment. And I have to go out and obviously meet a lot of new people. And I've taken that confidence from the football environment and obviously dealing with different characters within that field. And I've taken that forward. But I suppose at the time, I mean, I didn't even really realise that that was kind of part of my personality, if that makes sense. It was kind of one of those things where I was just used to playing football, used to the kind of day in, day out kind of like protocol. And then obviously to step completely away from that, not even involved in the game to any capacity anymore, I've kind of realised that I did have these kind of transferable skills that are relatable to other industries. So that's kind of one of my main messages for doing, obviously, this kind of well, what I'm doing at the moment. But in terms of yourself, so you kind of you obviously said that you thought you could play or compete for as long as possible. You didn't really consider maybe what you were going to do afterwards. So at what point did you think, okay, well, I need to kind of step away from this now and move into something else?
I think there was a series of events that just, sometimes life is beautiful because it's high, 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 high. Other times it's just like low, 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 low.
Yeah.
So like it was the year 2012, and I just, didn't qualify for Olympics because I had the way that like laser sailing works is that there can be only one participant per country that can represent,
Right.
so yeah, so we had like a tough competition between me and my nemesis, which we are actually super good friends, but we've always been somehow, same age, same kind of like circle, so
Yeah.
always pitted against each other. And this time he wiped the floor with me, and I didn't qualify. But then the second, and which was the most impactful problem, was the fact that my father's business went bankrupt. Because and that was horrible because it just sent my family into shambles and just brought even more forward this reality that sailing, if it is economically unsustainable, it's kind of like a game and it should be treated as such, right? So when I saw my family going through so much struggle, I just decided, hey, I can't continue playing. I just got to do something else. And so that's the moment where I started to explore maybe other areas such as business and try to reinvent myself. But it was completely unexpected. I didn't think that it would go that bad. But I mean, then, I'm a family man. So like, I think in life, certain things come first and then you move on from that.
Well, that's it. I mean, family always comes first anyway. But it still must have been a tough decision for you to make. And obviously, at a young age, you've got kind of that burden of potentially having to look after your family to a certain degree. So how did that feel? Because obviously, like you said, you were still very, very young at that point in your life.
I think like in a sense, I was lucky that the situation was so bad because then you don't have time to think. So it's kind of like when you're in such a situation where you don't have options to slow down and just feel the pain from other things. And so like in that case, like I just started evaluating options. So like if you look at the way you can earn money, you can apply for like a job, work for someone, or maybe open up your own business, or a combination of the two. And in that case, I just looked at, hey, if I get a job maybe into coaching, because let me just say that I knew nothing. Like the only thing I could do was race a boat really fast around the course, but that was my skill set, right? And so I was just looking at ways on how can I monetize on that and how can I leverage that. And all the options I was looking in front of me, they, in terms of working for someone else, just wasn't earning enough in order to cover, the lifestyle of 3 people. So the only option that I saw as viable at the time was the fact that, you open up a business, because in that case, if you succeed, the upside is really high. Of course, there is a lot of downside and risk, but if you figure it out and you come out successful, you can earn a lot more, from that, and quickly, that was also like a thing. You can earn a lot in a job, and maybe it can take many years and years to do it. But with a business, if you set things up, and have a lot of luck also, but you can set things up a little bit quicker,
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, prior to that, did you have any business acumen at all, or did you just kind of stumble into it and then kind of trial and error to a certain degree?
Trial and error, good old-fashioned trial and error. Like my business acumen was probably horrible. Like I had an interest in, because my first company was a small translation company that serviced small businesses, and I was just passionate about languages, and also I was just being very pragmatic in my choice, because I said, hey, my father had a similar business in the past, so maybe I could have used some of his mentorship on how to handle things. Although we couldn't work together because our personalities are just different. We're not good business partners at all, so we cannot stay in the same room and just discuss work. So no, there was no preparation before. It was just like, it's about trial and error and just getting out there and get things done, right? You got to try things out and see what works and learn how to learn, right? So you can actually progress throughout this whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, because it kind of resonates with my train of thought. When you look at retirement, it's always, well, not always, generally seen as a negative. It's perceived that way because it's probably put across that way. And what I'm trying to explain to people is, if you embrace it and embrace the challenge. And they're naturally in life anyway, there's always going to be ups and downs. So as a sports person, you probably would have experienced loads and loads of ups and downs anyway, throughout your career. So it's an opportunity for you to start life again to a certain degree. I retired when I was 31, so that's really young in life anyway. Physically now, I still think I could play. I mean, I'm someone who doesn't really put weight on and things like that, but and I'm lucky from that point of view. But I still think that when I retired at 31, I thought potentially I need to find something that I'm interested in, and I've always been interested in property. And lucky enough, I went for my first interview and I got the job, so I never really experienced that kind of rejection. If I did, and it was a case of 3 or 4 interviews before finding a job, it probably would have been slightly different. But for me, once I got that opportunity, I thought I can't turn this down, even though I was still in a position where I'd kind of been offered a contract elsewhere on the same day that I got offered the job to work. And I just thought, look, I can't turn that down, just because going forward, I know how hard it is for anyone to get a job anyway. So for me, with no kind of nothing on my CV was just sports based, so I had to sell myself through my personality, and that's another thing that I'm trying to explain to sports people. No one cares how many medals you've got. No one cares what kind of games you played in, or whether you competed in the Olympics to a certain degree, even though it's amazing. It's about what you can offer that company. So do your research, find out obviously what the company's about, who's working there, and what they're looking for in terms of employment, and then sell yourself that way. So yeah, I mean.
No, I can totally relate to that, man, you know, because I think like sometimes, you know, as you said, like the discussion has a negative connotation because I think it's presented maybe at the wrong time of the career of an athlete. Because if I'm in my prime and someone comes to me like with, you know, kind of like silly statistics on saying, hey, you know, like only a certain percentage of you are going to make it, so prep for something else. I will be very like not very kind to this person and just dismiss him or her, like you know, like you know, because like you don't want to hear, like it's not something you want to consider at time. But I think like I think it could be maybe reframed the whole conversation, which could be more about, you know, like saying that, you know, I think like when you're an athlete, right, you want to be the best version that you can be of yourself, right? And so I think being the best version that you can be means taking care of, or being ready to take care of different aspects of your game, right? And when you start just simply being aware of the problem, of the thing that maybe this thing is going to end, is going to maybe help you and set you up so that you have your back covered. You know that it's, you know, you have your expectations right, and you can actually play even harder because you just know, you know, you have correct expectations and you go into it with much more passion and drive, and you're free to do that, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I always say do what's right for you, because everybody's got different personality. Everyone's got different kind of things that they need to deal with in their life, whether it be family or whether it's kind of your involvement in whatever sport that you're in at that particular time. So there's no right or wrong. For me, it was just a case of I didn't want to go to college or study at home or whatever it may be. But I know that some of my teammates did that, and that's great. And obviously that led them to go forward into whatever they were studying and get a job in that field. Some of them didn't. Again, a lot of football players especially, they get coaching badges because naturally, being a footballer, your natural step after that is kind of becoming a football coach to some capacity. So whilst people are playing, they normally take their coaching badges, which is great. But then it doesn't guarantee you a job afterwards, because you need someone to obviously give you that opportunity. So a lot of people have got these coaching badges and certificates, and they're just collecting dust on their mantelpiece, which it's a bit, I don't know, it must be frustrating for them as well, because obviously they've gone through that. It's a pretty stringent course as well that you have to go through. So it's one of those situations for me at a young age, probably 23, 24. My train of thought was, okay, well, if I don't make enough money at the end of my career, or if my career doesn't look like it's going in that direction where I'm going to have a lot of money in a pot at the end of my career to maybe pursue other things easily or easier, then I'm probably going to have to look at getting another job. And I always knew that if that did happen, I'd be prepared to do that. So that was me kind of psyching myself up for the future. It was, 10 years or maybe slightly less further down the line, but I was still mentally prepared for it. It didn't hinder my performance at all in any way, but it was one of those situations where me as a person, I was always Danny Thomas first and then a footballer second. And not many people are like that. They kind of fall into that bubble in terms of what sport they're actually playing, and they're defined by that sport as opposed to being who they are as a person first. And sometimes that's their fault, and sometimes it's how other people perceive you. It just depends, really.
Yeah, but I think you're a very smart person, honestly. Or you were something like 24, and have that level of consciousness and maturity to look beyond yourself. It's amazing. I mean, hats off to you, dude. You're really amazing in a sense, because I think, like as you said, like when you identify yourself with a sport, then it will be extremely challenging to reimagine yourself under another identity or light. So naturally, then you're drawn to, hey, maybe I'm a sailor, you're a football, player. And then naturally you want to be like a sailing coach or a football coach because you want to stay in that lane of, being the expert at that. But as you said, if you are prepared for it, if you actually start explore that idea that you are a human first and then the human that applies his or her skill to that sport, then you can then say, okay, then I can apply myself and my skills to something else because the sport is simply what I do,
Exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's always difficult, and obviously, generally, sports people in general are kind of thick-skinned and kind of. You have to be selfish to a certain degree and single-minded, just because it's very ruthless. I can't really talk for sailing, but the footballing world is very, very ruthless and very, very cutthroat. So although you're working in a team environment, you have to essentially look after yourself. So obviously, your train of thought has led you towards kind of retirement. You're now obviously in a situation where you've retired from sailing. Just explain what you're doing now, obviously where people can contact you on social media, things like that.
Yeah, so like after the first company, it was 2015, I sold my first company away because it was just driving me crazy. Profitable, but driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Then if we fast forward to today, like what I'm doing mainly right now is just managing a portfolio of companies, which I'm in the translation technology industry, tax consulting, and software development. So that's what I do on a daily basis. But then kind of like as a side hustle, just as a way to give back to the athlete community, I decided to launch this project, which is Beyond Athlete Life, which is kind of like, it came really from the own reflections that I had. And I thought, like, hey, like the transition that I had was horrible because I was totally unsupported. I think right now we are living in a much better like environment where there are like projects like yours, the one that you're doing right now with this interview, or like even the Olympic Committee or the player associations have projects. So I just want to do my kind of like my own contribution, right, to help athletes like get a nudge forward in their next phase of their life, or at least to explore that. So the project is just me fundamentally like documenting some of the challenges and the insights that I have as I manage my companies, and I'm getting also in the world of investing. So that's also going to be an interesting thing to watch, because I really like, I'm a novice, but I'm going to try to figure it out. And so like I'm just documenting things in order to spark thoughts fundamentally. So I want you to like fundamentally athletes to look at what is my thought process and don't take it as I'm the expert or guru that tells you what to do, because I'm not. Honestly, I consider myself really dumb and that I know a lot less relative to what it is that I should know. But I think at least by looking at a process that it's maybe going to work or not work, but at least you can observe, the process and compare it to yours, use different point of views, and then synthesize your own way to do things, because ultimately I think every athlete comes from a unique situation. So what has worked for me doesn't necessarily work for you. So the best thing that I can do for you to give you a nudge forward is to show you, here is how I'm doing things, and then you can choose and we can collaborate and discuss on what is the best way going forward for you.
That sounds great and obviously really interesting. I mean, for me, I suppose the main message that I'm trying to get across whilst doing these talks with kind of former professional athletes like yourself is just to let athletes, former kind of sports people that, or even current ones, more so current ones, that they have got the transferable skills. They may not know it yet, but they have got them going forward. And a lot of industries are looking for kind of the employment of former sports people, just because they've naturally got that resilience, work ethic, kind of working well in teams and communication and dealing with kind of issues that kind of weren't foreseen, if that makes sense. Along with many other kind of things that kind of fall into being a professional athlete. But not, it's amazing just because like not many sports people are aware that they've got these skills. So it's just about kind of letting them know and just embracing retirement. And it could be a situation where someone's just received some bad news, 18, 19, just starting out in whatever their chosen field is, and maybe due to bad injury that they can't continue doing that. But life is short to a certain degree. Everyone says life's short, but it's also really long, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Makes total sense. So I think like one of the reasons why I also decided to kind of like document my own reality instead of telling people what to do is that after, you know, connecting with many different athletes that have made this transition away from sports, I realized that there is such a diverse ecosystem of opportunities that for athletes. So it's not just one type of business that you can pursue. You can pursue basically any opportunity because exactly like you said, you have these transferable skills, right? Of being able to attack a problem, deal with the pain or the like challenging process of learning about it and figuring things out, you know? And so like I'm in total agreement with you, you know, this is so beautiful that, you know, what you're doing. I think it's amazing, you know, like just giving this more awareness about the transferable skills, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, in this journey, it's still early days. I mean, I've only kind of done one conversation prior to speaking to yourself. So I'm going to try and be as active as possible on social media now, just to try and get this message across to people, just make them aware. And obviously, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to assist. But I'm sure, obviously, things that you're kind of progressing at the moment will be successful for yourself. It sounds like you're onto a really good thing there. Just once again, mention where we can kind of find you on social media going forward.
So I have a like a Instagram channel, if you call it like that. I've started using social media literally this December, so pardon me if I am not really good at it with the terms, but yeah, I have a yeah. By the way, like I think it's crazy, like just to one thing like that, the fact that, you know, like social media, it's actually a super powerful tool that like this is so beautiful that you and I have been able to connect through it. Sad that I haven't used it before, but you know, now I'm starting to figure things out. But anyways, like I have a like an Instagram channel, it's called Beyond Athlete Life, and then also like a YouTube channel which is under the same name, and also like putting the finishing touches on the website, which is going to be launched really soon, I hope. So that's where you can find me. And like to all athletes that are, you know, out there listening, if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to DM me or contact me, because I'm here just to talk, you know, and just give my time for free completely, you know, just to help you figure things out and just help you elaborate, you know, your ideas together, you know, because I don't tell you what to do, but we think together of how to go forward, you know.
Good stuff. Exactly the same. I can obviously I'll counter that as well, and that's exactly the same point of view, same angle that I'm approaching this from as well. So I mean, yeah, all I can say is good luck going forward with obviously anything that you decide to pursue. Good luck with your current kind of business avenues that you're looking to push forward with. And thanks for your time as well, because obviously I know how busy you are, Pierre, with life in Italy at the moment. And hopefully speak to you soon.
It's been such a pleasure, Danny. Thank you so much. You know, privilege, such a privilege, man.
No problem. See you soon.
All right. Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.